So we hear this all the time. Israel is the most moral military in the world. And if people die, innocent civilians die, it was just, they were caught in the crossfire. That's just an unfortunate part of war. They were used as human shields, but Israel would never intentionally harm a child or an innocent woman or innocent man. That is not what the Israelis would do. Well, the New York Times just came out with this really damning article saying 65 nurses and paramedics, what we saw in Gaza, alleging massive abuses towards children and even what looks like executions of children. And we're not talking about just under the age of 18 and they were holding a gun because they were 16 or 17-year-old. No, we're talking about 5-year-olds being shot in the head by Israel. How do you shoot a 5-year-old in the head unless you absolutely meant to do it? And how do you do it over and over and over? These kids are not caught in the crossfire. They're clearly being targeted. This is what this article says. This is written by Feroz Sidwa. She is or he or she, actually, I don't know. Sorry about that. Dr. Sidwa is a trauma and general surgeon who worked at the European hospital in Khan Yunis, Gaza for 2 weeks in March and in April. Here's the article. I worked as a trauma surgeon in Gaza from March 25th to April 8th. I volunteered in Ukraine and Haiti, and I grew up in Flint, Michigan. I've seen violence and worked in conflict zones, but many of the things that stood out about working at a hospital in Gaza, one got to me. Nearly every day I was there, I saw a new young child who had been shot in the head or the chest, virtually all of whom went on to die, 13 in total. At the time, I assumed this had to be the work of a particularly sadistic soldier located nearby. But after returning home, I met an emergency medicine physician who had worked in a different hospital in Gaza 2 months before me. I told him I couldn't believe the number of kids I saw shot in the head. And to my surprise, he responded, yeah, me too, every single day. God, they're just monsters. Goes on to say Israel does not allow journalists or human rights investigators into Gaza outside of a very small number of embedded reporting trips with the Israeli military, and stories from Palestinian journalists in Gaza have not been read widely enough, despite the incredible risks they take in reporting there. But there is a group of independent observers who have seen this war from the ground day after day, volunteer healthcare workers. I worked with Times Opinion to poll 65 healthcare workers about what they had seen in Gaza. 57, including myself, were willing to share their experiences on the record. The other 8 participated anonymously, either because they have family in Gaza or the West Bank, or because they fear workplace retaliation. This is what we saw. I do have to say that my Palestinian sources in the West Bank have, for the most part, dried up. And it's not because they don't want to say anything. They are very afraid to say anything. They will be targeted, and they just don't want to be targeted. So they prefer to not communicate, especially over, apps, chat apps, or anything like that. They are just really, the situation is so bad that they're really, truly afraid of speaking up. And that was happening even before the war. And now with the war, it's much worse. 44 doctors, nurses, and paramedics saw multiple cases of preteen children. So these are preteen. These are not teenagers. They recruit these kids and they're carrying guns and they're part of it. No, these are preteen children who had been shot in the head or chest in Gaza. It goes on to quote some of the doctors. Let me just read some of these quotes. One night in the emergency department, over the course of 4 hours, I saw 6 children between the ages of 5 and 12. All with a single gunshot wound to the head, to the skull. All with a single gunshot wound to the skull. 6 kids between 5 and 12. That is not caught in the crossfire. That is an execution. Another emergency nurse said pediatric gunshot wound patients were treated on the floor, often bleeding out on the floor of the hospital due to lack of space, equipment, staff, and support. Many died unnecessarily. A doctor says, I saw several children shot with high-velocity bullet wounds in both the head and chest. Another doctor says, our team cared for about 4 or 5 children, ages 5 to 8 years old. 5 to 8 years old. They were all shot with single shots to the head. Single shot to the head. That is an execution. That's what that is. That's not caught in crossfire. They all presented to the emergency room at the same time. They all died. A paramedic says, I saw a child who had been shot in the jaw. No other part of his body was affected. He was fully awake and aware of what was going on. He stared at me while he choked on his own blood as I tried to suction the blood out with a broken suction unit. A doctor says, one day while in the ER, I saw a 3-year-old and 5-year-old, each with a single bullet hole to their head. When asked what happened, their father and brother said they had been told that Israel was backing out of Khan Yunis, so they returned to see if anything was left of their house. There was, they said, a sniper waiting to shoot and shot both children. A sniper shot the kids in the head. Another doctor says, I saw an 18-month-old little girl with a gunshot wound to the head. Another doctor says, I saw many children. In my experience, the gunshot wound was often to the head. I mean, they're shooting them in the head. These doctors are saying that's what they're mostly seeing, kids shot in the head. That is not an accident. Say many had non-curable permanent brain damage. It was almost a daily occurrence to have children arrive at the hospital with gunshot wounds to the head. So look, I mean, this is what they do. This is what they're doing. And yet people are still denying this. I see this circulating on social media, and a lot of people, there was one woman that said, okay, I published this, but I retracted it. I deleted it from my page because we can't verify this information. What are you talking about? You can't verify this information. You've got 44 doctors saying, I saw kids shot in the head. What more do you need? A lot of these these are American doctors. Many of them are Jewish doctors. They went over there and this is what they saw, and you're just going to discount it because you think they have some agenda. They're pro-Hamas. They're against Israel, and so they're just making up collectively. They're all making up these stories. Out of the 65 that they contacted, 44 of them saw preteen kids shot in the head, but they're all they're in on it, some sort of collusion. I mean, this is insane. This is what we're funding. We're funding a genocide. There is no other way to look at this. The Israeli military, the Israeli government is radical. They have gone way. How did they get this radical? How did they get this far? These are questions that we should be asking so that we could prevent this. These were the questions we were supposed to ask after the Holocaust. Quite frankly, I thought that we had learned lessons. I thought we had figured that out. I thought that was the whole point of learning about the Holocaust and saying never again, so we could spot the signs and say never again, not just never again for Jews, never again for anybody. But, the Israelis are doing this. Here's another report that came out today. The Guardian came out saying UN peacekeepers in Lebanon say Israel is fired on their base deliberately. So peacekeepers, UN peacekeepers are being shot at deliberately. So they're shooting kids in the head. They're shooting at the UN peacekeepers. We know they're targeting journalists. So they're doing, so what is that? How is that the most moral military in the world? Somebody explain to me what makes them so moral. I would love to know. I mean, if this is moral, I don't know what immoral is. I mean, this seems to be as pretty much as bad as it possibly can get. Let's get to some of these great journalists who are doing a great job, and they're pressing the State Department's Matt Miller on a variety of different points about these conflicts. This is Liam Cosgrove with the Gray Zone. And he is asking about all of these escalations that we're marching ourselves into. What is the Biden administration thinking when they antagonize Russia, a nuclear power? What are they thinking when they antagonize Iran? What are they thinking when they fund a genocide? Watch this.
Go ahead. So Israel is still poised to strike Iran. And in July, Blinken said that Iran was 1 to 2 weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. So I guess for all we know, they might have one by now. And meanwhile, in Ukraine, they've struck deep within Russian territory several times, as deep as 300 miles from the border. And in that case, we don't have to guess. We know that Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet, as many as 6,000 warheads. And so one of the risks of arming militaries that are striking in the territories of nuclear powers is that one of those gets deployed, and then it could escalate very quickly from there. So it's rarely discussed, but it's important to address that the nuclear risk is real, and it could very abruptly mean the end of what humans have worked for thousands of years to collectively achieve. And us today are very lucky to live with the fruits of that achievement, and I feel like we're treating the risks kind of brazenly. So my question for you is, we often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khomeini, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, I mean, what gives you the right to lecture other countries on their moral?
So if you have a policy question for me, I'm happy to take it. If you want to give a speech, there are plenty of places in Washington where you can give a speech.
Yeah, but people are sick of the bullshit in here. I mean, it is a genocide. You are abetting it, and you are risking nuclear war in Ukraine for this proxy war.
Plenty of other places to give a speech. Go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. Bangladesh is
Yeah, that is a legitimate question. What are you thinking? You're funding this genocide and you're escalating tensions. The Biden administration should 100% answer to the American people. What are you thinking? What is the plan here? What are we doing? That was just great questioning. Matt Miller didn't want to answer the question, of course. He didn't want to dive into that, trying to justify. I don't know how Matt Miller still does his job. Honestly, I don't know how he looks in the mirror and continues day after day to have to excuse away a genocide, how he excuses away Israel's war crimes, how he excuses away the escalations, the tensions, everything that we're getting ourselves into. Here he is trying to excuse it away again. This is Ryan Grimm asking a really great question. He's asking about the threat that Netanyahu came out with the video in English, speaking to the people of Lebanon, saying, basically, turn in your Hezbollah soldiers or else you're going to turn into Gaza. Watch this line of questioning.
So you said earlier that Israel has a right to attack Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. I wanted to ask if you had seen the Israeli Prime Minister's
I should mention, by the
video
way,
that he put out in English.
I should mention that we sped this up because those of you who know Ryan, which, I was with him on the Hills Rising, he speaks really slow. So we sped it up. If Ryan sees this, come on, Ryan, we have to speed it up. Here
to the people of Lebanon last night, he had a couple lines in there. He said, "You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza. I say to you, the people of Lebanon, free your country from Hezbollah so that this war can end." That seems like a blanket threat against the civilian population. Is that terrorism?
So, first of all, let me say we cannot and must not see the situation in Lebanon turn into anything like the situation in Gaza. That would, of course, not be acceptable. And ultimately, it is as I said in response to an earlier question, it is up to the Lebanese people, not anybody else, to decide on who their government is. I said in response to an earlier question, no country in the region should dictate to the Lebanese people who their leaders are. Not Israel, not the United States, not any of the other countries in the region, and that should continue
Israel is dictating
to be the case. No, they're conducting operations going after a terrorist organization. That's a different thing than dictating what the civilian government should be. That's a question for the Lebanese people to decide.
But if they decide against Israel's wishes, Israel is threatening Gaza-like annihilation of the people of Lebanon.
And I'm making very clear that there should be no kind of military action in Lebanon that looks anything like Gaza and leaves a result anything like Gaza.
Okay, well then, simple solution. All you need to do is stop funding Israel. Why is it that Israel does nothing of what we want them to do? I mean, the claims anyway, of course, the claims could be wrong. They could be just misleading. The claim is the Biden administration has pressed Netanyahu for going and doing a ceasefire deal with Hamas. But Israel rejects that. They said, don't invade Lebanon. Israel rejected that. They said, don't escalate tensions with Iran. Israel rejects that. Israel is doing whatever the hell Israel wants to do. And yet we're giving them billions and billions of dollars. And they're not accountable at all, apparently, in fact, we're just sitting here making excuses for the fact that we are being railroaded over by Israel. I mean, do we have any self-respect whatsoever as a country? No, because we're not a sovereign nation. We're clearly run by Zionists. We clearly have Zionists behind the scenes pulling the strings, and they have been for a very long time. When you go back even to Truman's time, when they sent letter bombs to Truman and somehow got into his administration and strong-armed him into recognizing the state of Israel, I don't think he did that because he really wanted to. He probably did that because he was afraid for his life and they threatened him. And we've seen these threats through time and potentially the infiltration of our administration. I mean, that's what it's looking like. That's what it's looking like to the average person who's paying attention to this. It looks like they've infiltrated our government at every single level. And that is why our government is basically just doing whatever. Okay, well, we told them, we tried our best. I don't know what else to do, just acting like they're the alpha, they're the ones in charge. And maybe they actually are. I want to play this last clip for you. This was from a couple of months ago, actually, but this involves. Do you remember the case of the little girl who she was Hind Rajab? She died back in January. She was killed back in January. She was the little girl that was in the car and pleading for help, making the call, help me, help me. And the paramedics ended up, they blew up the paramedics. They killed the girl, shelled her with 300 and some odd tank shells. Well, after that incident, Israel, of course, like usual, and this is what the US government's answer always is, when they were asked about this back in January after it happened, the State Department said Israel's doing an investigation. So they investigate themselves. Every time there's an atrocity, Israel is going to do an investigation. Well, this is the result of the investigation that they did. Par for the course. We've seen this time and time again. Watch this.
A UK-based research group concluded Israeli tank likely killed 6-year-old Palestinian child, Hind Rajab. Investigation revealed that Rajab's car was hit with 355 bullets, and it's not plausible that Israeli tank couldn't see children inside the car. Have you seen the reports, and do you have any updates on the investigation? It's been more than 4 months, and a lot of my colleagues have been asking about that.
Yeah, so we have seen the reports, and I will tell you what our latest interaction with the government of Israel is about this. So we went to the government of Israel and pressed them for information, and they told us that there were no IDF tanks operating in the area, no IDF forces operating in the area at the time of that attack, which I believe is something they've also said publicly. After further reporting, we went back to them and pressed them again. And so what they told us is that they went to the UN organizations, they went to the Palestinian Red Crescent, they asked for information, because you've seen all of those organizations quoted in stories. They asked for information that they could use to further an investigation, and no one provided them with any information. That's the latest.
Oh, yeah, blame it on everybody else. Look, we didn't have anybody operating there at that time. We don't know what happened. We asked these other, Red Crescent and all of them, and they just wouldn't talk to
So
us.
who shot
Okay,
the 355 tank bullets?
I'm not able to, look, I'm not on the ground. I can't offer any kind of assessment about this. That's why we've called for we've called for the government of Israel to conduct an investigation. I can't speak to what their internal processes look like. All I can tell you is what they've, all I can tell you is what they've told us, and what they've said is they went to the UN and the Palestinian Red Crescent and asked them to supply information that would help them. And what they claim is that they were given none.
But it's not concluded yet, the investigation, or is it?
No, I would refer you to the government of Israel for that. I can only tell you what they have told us.
Okay, so he's saying we don't know who fired 335 tank rounds. Who else has tanks in Israel? Does Hamas have tanks? Last time I checked, they don't have any tanks. Hezbollah wasn't there with tanks. I mean, nobody was there with tanks. Only Israel was there with tanks. And yet he's sitting there saying, we don't know. Israel did an investigation and they came back and said they don't know. They don't know what happened. They didn't have anybody there at the time. So we have no idea how 2 paramedics that were coming to rescue this little girl ended up killed, and how this little 5-year-old ended up with 335 tank rounds in her. We don't know. And that has been the answer this whole time. And that is how we have ended up backing a genocide. And the craziest thing about it is so many people believe what Israel says. So many people are just buying it hook, line, and sinker, although I think fewer and fewer people are. I think more people are saying, hey, it's just too much. This is just happening over and over again. It's one thing to make a mistake 1 time or 2 times. It's war. But for it to be happening over and over and over again, more and more people are saying, no, this is not adding up. Israel's committing war. They're committing a genocide. It's not just war crimes. This is not the most moral military in the world. And if you have to say we're the most moral military in the world, you are not the most moral military in the world. This is what our government says. And the worst part about, I think, Matt Miller's responses is that this is what our government thinks of we, the people. They don't want to answer questions. They don't think we deserve the answers. They treat us like they're ahead of us. They're above us. They're in charge, and we're just the peons. And they forget that they actually work for us, that we have the right to ask them questions, and they absolutely must answer those questions. We are paying their salaries. We have voted them in. We are the people that they need to be answering to. But instead, they do this whole, we'll get back to you. We'll talk about that. They just treat us like we're children. They treat us like, they just have complete disdain for the people. And that is, our founding fathers would be rolling around they would just be rolling in their graves if they were seeing this today, what this country has become. The fact that we allow our government to just run right over us. This is exactly what they were revolting against. And here we are, back to it, just letting our government lie to us and cheat us and steal from us and commit atrocities in our name and not answer for any of it because we're just peons. And they're the ones in charge. I mean, it's just absolutely despicable what is going on. But I think more and more people are, in fact, waking up to this. All right, guys, let's get back to basics. Real strength, vitality. Naked Organs by Rumble is designed for men who demand more from their supplements. It's packed with nutrient-rich bison organs, delivering key vitamins like B12 and D, plus minerals and CoQ10. These ingredients naturally boost energy. They support testosterone, enhance muscle recovery, and sharpen mental clarity. No fillers, no additives, no preservatives, just pure bison organs to keep you performing at your best. And while you're there, check out Sleep Naked, the sleep supplement designed to help men recover overnight and wake up ready to feel and be your best. So visit benaked.com, use the code Kim to save 15% off. Thank you so much for watching. This was just a clip from the longer, larger show that you can catch Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. That'll route you to the platform where you need to be in order to get the full uncensored show every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Click on that link, watch the full interview. See you there.